On the road, in the gym, at a coffee house. No matter where you listen, this is Prevention Perk. I'm Steve Miller with Mid-America PTTC. It's time to perk up our prevention efforts. My guest today is Monty Stiles, a self-described accidental photographer who served many years as an assistant United States attorney in Boise, Idaho, but is now a sought-after speaker and trainer on a variety of subjects relating to the law, law enforcement, drug education, building strong communities, protecting and nurturing children, and photography. His presentation titled Rediscovering Joy, Why Prevention Works caught my attention as it encapsulates his life's journey and leaves the audience inspired to continue the work of impacting lives and changing communities. Hello, Monty, and welcome to Prevention Perk.
Good afternoon. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's jump right into this. We're going to have a great conversation, I can already tell. What was your path to get into prevention? I already said that you started out on the side of the law, so to speak. Not that you're on the other side of it now, but what was your path to get into prevention? How'd you get interested in doing this?
That's a good question. I'm probably an accidental prosecutor too. I grew up on a small farm in Emmett, Idaho, population 4,000, and had a great life, had great friends, family, leaders, involved in scouts, involved in sports, a lot of outdoor activities. And when I got out of law school and was hired as a county prosecutor, I suddenly encountered a world that was very foreign to me. I think I'd lived a rather charmed life, great people, great friends. Nothing really bad happened to me. And as a deputy prosecutor, I was immediately hurled into the dark side, the darkest aspects of human nature. I was just telling a youth group Sunday night that one of the first homicide I ever attended was 2 weeks into my career, where I not only went to a homicide, but I was in an autopsy. And this was like an amazing experience to suddenly see that side of the world that up to that point you only read about in a newspaper or saw on the news. And even then, you only saw a small part of that. So when I became a prosecutor and started handling cases that showed the consequences of bad choices, it wasn't just breaking the law, it was the consequences of those choices of breaking the law. I immediately recognized the need for other people to know these things because most people do not. They pay very little attention to what goes on. And if they do see something in the newspaper or on the 6 o'clock news, it's not real to them. It's just, oh, that happened. And so very early in my career, I felt the need to take the things I learned and help other people understand the realities of that happening in their community so that they would pay attention and do something about it, that they would be more involved in their communities, they would pay more attention to laws, pay more attention to choices people make, try to help children that are victims of these bad choices. And that came to me very, very early.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. The funder of this project, along with all the other products of the Mid-America PTTC, is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Although funded by SAMHSA, the content of this recording does not necessarily reflect the views of SAMHSA. The DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency mission, is to reduce the supply and the demand of drug use in our nation. For this reason, DEA created a community outreach section on their website as a complement to their primary law enforcement mission and included drug use prevention as one of the 7 priorities in DEA's vision. To learn more, visit dea.gov. So you talk about it kind of you said the darker side. So what are some of the challenges, like, especially if you're prosecuting cases or you're involved in cases that are in the realm of drug trafficking or whatever that looks like? What are some of those
Sure.
challenges that you faced in the role as a prosecuting attorney?
Well, early in my career, I spent 5 years in the Ada County Prosecutor's Office. before I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I did everything from speeding tickets to drunk driving to burglaries and then robberies and then serious other crimes, including homicides. Um, the I think the second year of my career I spent in the juvenile system. I was the only juvenile prosecutor. And what that meant was I dealt with every kid in the county that had problems with the law. They all came across my desk. And so I got to meet them. I got to see what they were doing, what kind of crimes they'd committed. I usually got to talk to them in the end. I talked to their parents. I talked to their friends. I figured out why they did what they did. And I quickly learned there are a couple of reasons for kids that get in trouble with the law. One is that they're rebellious and they do dumb things, but more often they were uh, doing what they learned behaviors, things that they saw. And that was often the result of choices they made with friends, but also often the case of having it taught to them in their homes, what they saw in their homes. At the same time, I saw a lot of awesome parents who had kids that are just gone off the deep end and were making bad choices. So I very quickly learned why kids were getting in trouble, became very concerned about that, and wanted to get to the root cause of the problem, not just fix the problem at the broken end, but get to the root cause. And one of the greatest epiphanies I had was after being in felony court for 3 years in a row and watching people either plead guilty or be sentenced for crimes they committed, felonies for the most part. It was very easy to see that most of those people were there because of an underlying substance abuse problem. And so you're dealing with robberies and rapes and murders and all of those things. When you start to see those as precipitated by substance abuse problems, I started to see myself as this little guy on a little step stool on the outside of a giant banyan tree that you see in some countries. It's this giant banyan tree with a huge base, huge limbs. And I felt like a little guy out there with a pair of nail clippers clipping off a few leaves at the end of a branch and not feeling like I was accomplishing much. And I got this sense that if we want to really make a difference in society, we have to figure out what the roots are, where they are, and figure out how to cut off those roots so that this problem tree doesn't continue to flourish. And to me, those root causes were in large part substance abuse, legal and illegal. So 2 years into my career, I asked if I could start the first drug task force in our county. Probably the first one in the state. And my boss was kind enough to let me do that. From there, that's pretty much all I did was drug cases. We started doing wiretaps. We got a grand jury going, started indicting 20, 30 people at a time. And that's where my career in drug enforcement basically started. It was a realization that the root cause is where I should focus my efforts.
So that kind of took you, I guess, your look, say, your root cause, and then you go through this career as a prosecuting attorney. And somewhere towards the end, I've read some of your story, your bio, if you will. And somewhere towards the end, you were like, you personally, it was like, I need to get back to, I don't know, uh, more grounded, I guess. And was it the photography that really wanted you to move
Yeah,
away from being a prosecuting attorney? I mean, looking through that lens, it's like I want to change my life because there's obviously some transition. You went from one day you're
yeah,
hauling in bad guys, the next day you're doing something really dramatically different.
yeah. The journey from being a deputy, a rookie deputy prosecutor to the end of my prosecuting career was a journey that involved some of the darkest aspects of humanity. I mean, when you're dealing with large scale drug trafficking organizations, you see everything you see everything, the darkest hearts, the most heinous crimes. It's not just drugs, it's the guns that go with it, it's the violence that goes with it, it's the addictions, the endless trail of human misery that drugs bring to people. And on a personal level, that was dealing with victims and family members that had been damaged from drug trafficking, all the way to the top of a drug trafficking chain. We were dealing with kingpins that make millions of dollars, that all of that in between. I saw all of that, and I think in my federal job, I was the head of the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, which is a fancy name for a group of agents from DEA, FBI, marshals, IRS, state and local narcs, foreign narcotics agents. And we had a team of people that we would literally sit around and talk about who are the biggest, baddest, meanest, nastiest drug trafficking organizations we can identify. And once that happened, we would put the forces together to investigate them. Sometimes that happened very slowly, sometimes it happened quickly, but the investigation would be more about organizations than it was individuals, because you realize quickly that if you just cut off one limb, the rest of it goes on. So it was always targeted at organizations. Almost always these organizations went across state lines and sometimes international lines. And those organizations could be anything from a Mexican cartel to an outlaw motorcycle gang to one time an LA street gang, South, South Central LA street gang that moved from LA to Pocatello, Idaho to set up a crack cocaine distributing organization. Gang members with nicknames like Spanky, Junior, Grizzly, Shorty, unbelievable, Pocatello, Idaho. And so, and all of that, there were some of the worst people you can imagine. At the same time, I quickly learned that even the most horrible people, when you got down to their core and you could remove them from that kind of life, there was something good about them. There's probably only a handful of people I dealt with in my whole career that just seemed inherently evil and unredeemable. But others, if you get them out of that world, you can find a core of goodness in them that made it sad that they made those choices that resulted in them going into prison for a long time. But all of those experiences, every one of them early in my career made me feel like I had to take this knowledge about what's happening and I had to tell people in the public. They needed to understand the real life consequences of substance abuse. And so I very quickly got to start speaking in schools, Boy Scout groups, churches. It was never my job to do so. I had to do it on my own time. But I immediately felt the need to share this information with other people. And over the years, that developed to the point where the demand for the speaking was too much for me to be able to do and maintain my job. Fortunately, I had a really good US attorney who saw the value also and gave me a lot of time to go out and give talks to lots of people. So the speaking thing developed as I was a prosecutor. And my current life is the result of loving that type of work and feeling the need to do it full time.
So you transitioned away from prosecuting to drug prevention or talking about it, a number of things, healthy communities. You've been doing this for a while as far as keynoting or presenting. Have you found a message? Like if you had one message you had to deliver, what would you try to convey to your audience? Is there something that you've stumbled across and like, yeah, this is the central of everything that I talk about?
Yeah, I think that the case the presentation you mentioned at the beginning, rediscovering joy, and sometimes that's a keynote that's combined with why prevention works. Oftentimes, those are two different things because they both require a good deal of time to explain adequately, but sometimes those are combined. And yes, if I had to pick a subject where I feel like I can have the most benefit to people, it would be one or both of those topics for reasons I can explain if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great because I'm kind of curious as far as, it's a professional endeavor that you have, but I'm sure that like a lot of people that comes out of it, like almost like a personal why, like there's something inherent in us. And it's like we find a thing that we want to just share with the world. And it might be
Sure.
with you, it seems like it's like all your life kind of comes to a head when you get an opportunity to share this. And I wonder what it's like
Yeah,
in your life. Like how do you rediscover that joy? How does that come out of you into a presentation that you then in turn share with an audience?
sure. So the the short explanation for that is earlier in my career, I felt the need to just tell whether it's a group of youth in a school assembly or it's community leaders. I felt like my main job was to tell them about these bad drugs and what they do. It was all about drug education. Marijuana does this, heroin does this, meth does this. It was boom, 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 all the grim realities of drug use. After a while, I began to realize that I felt empty at the end because I've only provided ugly information without a solution. So it kind of evolved to where I would give the grim realities, but offer solutions to a school or community leaders or legislators or whoever on how to stop this, how to educate people, how to help people make good choices. But even then, as things developed and my audiences got bigger and bigger, I started to realize that when I say all the grim realities, even if I offer solutions, I have to provide people the hope that that this can actually happen. That not here's some ideas, but this is why this works. This is why these ideas can cause miracles to happen in your communities. And fortunately, I had a lot of examples of seeing that happen where people with vision made miracles, allowed miracles to happen in a whole variety of ways. So it kind of went to that. And then towards the end of my prosecutor career, and I know, Steve, you know this, but um, I wasn't prepared to retire when I left the U.S. Attorney's Office. I was too young to retire. A retirement salary was not in the cards when I decided to leave a very good, high-paying job that I was very good at and loved. I decided to walk away from that out of this sense of duty of spending my time full time helping people understand the root causes and the solutions to all of that. So when I walked away, people in my office, the agents, everyone thought I was crazy to leave a job and without a job. And I still don't have a job. I told you that when we're sitting around the table introducing everybody at a meeting, everybody goes, "Well, I'm so and so from such and such." And it gets to me, and I say, "I'm Monty from my house. I'm literally from my house, and this is my this is my organization, is me and my house." So when I had a chance to leave, I didn't have a really good understanding of what I was going to do. I just needed to know whatever time I had left on earth, I needed to spend it in all positive ways. I'd spent decades putting people in prison for good reason. I was good at it. I had wonderful agents, good people to work with, but I felt this call to do something else. And so that's what I did. I mainly did law enforcement training, drug prevention, education. I loved working with community leaders. I love working with youth. One of my favorite topics is service-based service-based leadership. Love doing all that. But the rediscovering joy part of it is what happened is 20 years into my career, this is when our 5 kids had started to leave home for college, get married, whatever. And Sandy and I went from a very active house with kid things going on every day to they're gone. And now I go to work, come home, go to work, come home. And one day I woke up feeling depressed. And this is a very foreign feeling for me. I'm not naturally that way. And thinking about it, I realized that my view of the world had turned kind of dark because that's all I did was deal with these people, the awful things, that I started to think the world was a very dark and foreboding place full of bad people doing bad things. And this scared me because I didn't want to feel that way. And in the absence of kids and not yet grandkids, I decided I need a hobby. And so just because I love nature already and the outdoors, I decided I'd pick up a cheap film camera. And that one event changed my life in a powerful way because when I started looking through the lens of a camera, what do you think I was drawn to? I was drawn to everything that is beautiful, unique, amazing. And the whole idea was not only to find it, but to really see it and capture it and then share it with other people. That event changed the way I taught because it gave me now the ability to describe this world I'd lived in, but then transition into everything that's wonderful about life. So that rediscovering joy is talking about a journey from being a small child on a farm in Emmett, Idaho, who most of us as children are filled with wonder and awe for the universe we live in. Everything's cool. And then rediscovering it much later in my life, where there is a renewed sense of wonder and awe for where we live. The creatures, the people, the adventures, the opportunities to open up the world again that I found and share that with other people. And it gives people hope.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. A podcast is like a breakout session from your daily routine. It's a unique way to perk up your prevention efforts. We'd like to hear from you. Please send your comment, topic, or guest suggestion to midamericapttc@gmail.com. Is the intersection of all this, is it the photography? Is that where it is? Or do you think that it's something more intrinsic in you that there's an intersection for all of these things to come together?
I think photography is a way to help because I use a lot of my pictures in presentations and I start with, of course, I tell them the story about this change in my life and what it caused to happen. But then I start showing them pictures, small things, macro photography, then into my favorite thing, which is wildlife photography, and then pictures of people that are amazing people, and then adventures and opportunities. And I end up showing pictures, grand pictures of sunsets on lakes and high mountain peaks and all of these things. And then I go to a picture of the earth, which I always make a joke. I did not take that picture, but someday I hope to. And then things further and further out and end up showing them Hubble telescope pictures with thousands of lights that aren't stars. They're galaxies with hundreds and thousands, hundreds of billions of stars and planets in each little speck. And saying, how could we ever be bored on this earth, in this universe? How could we ever bored? This is all offers people things that are infinitely better than anything the drug culture can offer. How could we ever be bored? So I think the photography is just a way to show people those opportunities that are out there. For kids, it's an opportunity to get excited about all the things to see and do and experience that are positive in life. But for me personally, it is just the way that I rediscovered. I could have done it in other ways, but it was the way I rediscovered this sense of awe and sense of awe for the world we live in. It gave me a new perspective that even though there are things that are still bad and awful, the world is infinitely fascinating and offers so much to people, whether it's through renewed faith, a renewed looking at the world in a different way. Um, it's just a tool for me. Photography is not only a tool, but it was a window for myself to move in a positive direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm curious. So you talk about, presenting this, and I've seen the presentation that we're talking about, but when you're delivering this to an audience of teenagers, I don't know what age ranges, maybe all age ranges you present to, but do you get feedback? I mean, what you're trying to convey, does it resonate with the audience, and are they giving you some kind of feedback either in that moment, or do you hear a feedback? As sometimes when I present, I'll hear about it at a later
Sure,
time, but do you get
sure.
that? Like, people are like, "Oh, I get this," and it opens up a world for them?
Yeah, that's a really cool question. I've got drawers full of stuff about that. As a speaker yourself, you kind of know how this works. To be effective as a speaker, you first have to establish your credibility as a speak in on the topic, and you have to explain, I know these things because of this. And some people do that because of academic experience, college education things. Mine's more of a real life. I know these things because I did these things. And you also have to establish credibility with the audience that you're there because you care about them collectively, individually. You're there not because somebody's paying you, but because you care about them. Once you establish the credibility, your credibility as a source of information, and they know you care about them, you're in a better position to teach. Then the information that you teach them, you worry about what the response is. And I think I judge the I judge my success with people in part by how attentive they are. Are the kids in a big auditorium? Are they listening? Are they talking or whatever? I know I'm on when there's not anyone talking and I'm getting to them. As I like to walk around, so even in an auditorium, I'll walk around and look at them and talk to them. So you gauge it that way, but you also gauge it by at the end by the way you feel towards them and the way you feel they feel towards you. And it's not a sense of pride or anything like that. Actually it's a real connection. Like they know at the end that I care about them. And the best responses I get back are not, oh, you gave a great talk or oh, that was a funny story, is they just want to talk to me. They want to tell me stories. They want to explain how that resonated with them. That's when it's real, whether it's after the event or later in a letter or a phone call. That's when I know I've done some good, even if it's just for one person.
That's interesting. I had a similar experience because, like I said, I've spoken for a number of years, but I did a delivery here recently, and the response was surprising to me because it wasn't anything really new, with the exception of one thing. I always kind of did presentations from like the facts. It's like, here's what the research says, or
Sure,
here's what we know, or here's what we're working towards, or here's how
sure.
you apply the strategic prevention framework, those kinds of things. But this particular instance, I actually put myself in the narrative, and the
Oh,
audience resonated with that because I think that it showed I guess maybe, a realism or a vulnerability. Like, I just
ah,
kind of explained that this is my
ah,
role in all of this. Kind of what you're saying. It's like my role in this thing called prevention, or as a prevention specialist, or the
yeah.
work that I do, is a title and it's a job, but underneath it all is this me. It's this person that has this desire to share this body of knowledge or experience that I have. And somehow or another, that made a huge difference with the audience, in that they said they just resonated with, like, they could relate to it, or they wanted to, like you're saying, wanted to share a story. And I think it's kind of the same thing. You get that immediate feedback where you're connected with them and they're connected with you, and somehow or another You just want to say, hey, this was valuable time spent with one another. So yeah, I've
Oh, no,
gotten,
I think I can see that's a huge difference, Steve. It's a difference between somebody coming to teach something and someone who invests emotionally, spiritually, intellectually of themselves to share that message and that you care about those people. Rediscovering joy for kids is more about them seeing all the possibilities of life and making good choices. If it's a group of prevention people, rediscovering joy is kind of the idea that what they do is very hard and nobody really appreciates it, but it's so important. And to maintain a healthy life, they have to have a balance in their life where they're finding things of joy to keep them going in their job that's difficult.
yeah.
Same with cops.
Are you familiar with like Simon Sinek's work on discovering your
Oh,
why,
sure.
which
Yep.
is kind of what I equate it to? It's underneath us all is there's something that drives us, and it may come out in our work. It could come out in child rearing or any number of things. But if I draw it into the work that I'm most familiar with and that I'm the profession that I'm in now, I'm curious, and that's the reason I asked the question, what's your path to prevention? Because somewhere underneath it, and like I think you've illustrated, there is a why, there is a reason that's personal to us that we wake up every day. And if we can tap into that personal why and connect it with the work or the livelihood that we do, it's like it's not really a job. And you hear these kinds of things from people that have written books or speak on it and those kinds of things. But I'm finding it to be a reality in my life that people are looking for,
Yeah.
and or they resonate with because they found it. It's like it doesn't matter which part you're coming from. There's someone in the audience that's like, I'm looking for what you just said, or I found what you said, let me tell you my story. And this happens because I think that what gets left out a lot of times in this work is that personal side of why we do this work, because you really have to have something. This is my understanding, you have to have some reason to do this work, because it's not instant gratification. You don't get up and go, today we're going to prevent all the drug use in this small
Yeah.
community, and then we'll go on to the next community. It's days and weeks and months and years, and it's
Yeah.
it's a accumulation of your work. And if you're looking for successes or outcomes and that kind of reward or gratification, it's going to be hard spent to get there. But if you're in it to win it for some other reason, then I
Yeah.
think that the audience or the communities or the people that you engage with resonate with that. And I find that interesting, because that would have been the last place I would have thought that you would find the sustaining power for this kind of work. But it really is the things that you're talking about, finding something that's innate or a quality within you that you can bring forth into your job. And then you can just work from home. Hi, I'm Steve from home.
Well, so here's the odd thing. I left a very high-paying job that I loved to go into drug prevention. Does that sound like a financially wise decision?
Not financially, but from the heart, it makes perfect sense.
Very stupid financial decision I live with every day. Uh, would I change a minute of it? No. But here's the interesting thing about drug prevention and law enforcement. Most of our drug prevention people are worn out through lack of funding, public support, all kinds of things. They're worn out. Many people feel like the prevention things are not working. Society is more and more willing to accept the drug culture, be part of it. We feel like it's a losing, not me. Many feel like it's a losing cause, so they just go along with their job every day, just trying to survive and get that next um, grant, whatever, but without any real support from the public or politicians or anybody. So they feel beset upon. Law enforcement is the same. Who wants to be a cop today in this world? They just are plagued with lots of reasons not to want to be cops. But the reality is, if people understand the things that happen in society because of drug, if they really truly understand, and they understand that there are solutions to these things, they will support drug prevention. They will support law enforcement, but they have to be given the information about why it's important, the consequences of not paying attention, and that these programs actually work. And in our own drug prevention world, one of my biggest frustrations is I'll go to a state conference and have 300 people in there, and most of them are just want to quit and go do something else because they've lost the feeling that they can actually change things. And I come in with just the opposite. I said, look what we've done through the decades with things like seatbelts and smoking and littering and Smokey the Bear, stop forest fires, and all of the things. We've even taught humans to follow their dogs around and pick up stuff on the ground. You think about aliens, if they're watching us, they think the dogs are in charge. We've even taught humans to do that. And how do we do that? Well, we teach them why it's important. But number one, we create a social construct where their neighbors will shun them if they don't perform these duties. We know how to educate people. So why are we failing in some ways in drug prevention? It's because we follow the same dumb plans that haven't worked, or we lose faith in them, or we have people that are competing for the same scarce resources, and it's more about writing grants and getting money than the actual work. So I think a lot of it is inspiring people to help them understand we do know how to fix these problems, and we can. That's what I love to do, is help reinvigorate their belief in drug prevention, why it works, what we can do to make it work better.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. Interested in learning about how photography can be incorporated into your prevention efforts? Photo Voice is a great tool. There are several research papers, case studies, and examples about this art form available on the internet. The Community Toolbox has a great resource complete with examples and a downloadable PowerPoint. And ACT Missouri offers a toolkit to help jumpstart a student photo voice. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, Photo Voice helps tell the whole story. Learn more today. There are links for these resources in our show notes. Well, Monty, you're a fascinating guest. I'd have you back anytime. And we're not visual here, but I'm going to put like some links in the show notes so they can connect with you and especially see your photography, because it's really good work. I mean, you say you're an accidental photographer, but you've accidentally captured a lot of really fascinating images. So I want people to be able to get to take a look at those, and we'll share those. But before you get away, I'm always curious: is there something that we didn't talk about that you're passionate about and I overlooked, or it's your chance to kind of be the sage on the stage? What's your final thought before we bring this conversation to a close?
Two things. One simple. I love what you do, Steve. Keep it up. You and I talked a lot before today, and I feel like we share a similar vision of the world and desire to do similar things that are important. But the other one is this. I often get calls from someone, doesn't matter where it is, might be Fort Myers, Florida, and the typical call will be, Monty, can you come and talk to our kids in our school? And I'm kind of pause and I go, okay, yeah, that date's available. What do you want to accomplish? And the typical answer is, well, we just want you to come and talk to our kids. No, what do you really want to accomplish? Well, they often don't think about that, because what a lot of them are doing is they're checking off a box. They're finding a speaker to come talk to their kids because that checks off a box. And I said, well, what do you really want to accomplish? Well, the underlying answer is always something like, well, we want you to come and fix our kids. And so the next question is, do you think that someone from Boise, Idaho can come and talk to your kids for 45 minutes and fix them? Is that really what you're thinking? And they are nervous about that. And so then I say, do you really want to make a difference? Well, yeah. If you really want to make a difference for your kids, let's do these things. And I give them 4 or 5 things that we can do in the same day that won't cost them any additional money, that will fix things. And that includes, get me in front of your community stakeholders. Because if we can't convince the people who make laws, write policies, and make budgets to change behaviors, to change things. We cannot help these kids. Get me in front of them. Get me in front of your kids, but also get me in front of some of your youth leaders so we can talk about things they can do in their schools. Get me in front of take me to the juvenile detention center or an alternative high school. Instead of scheduling a meeting at the gym on a Thursday night that you advertise for 2 months and get 10 parents there, take me to a big church where there's going to be 300 people there and let me talk to them. We set out a whole day's agenda. And when that happens, I say yes, because I know that my time will be spent productively and I can do something more than check off a box. So if a final word would be, I hope that people think big. What can we do to not just check off boxes, but to actually make a difference? And I think those categories of influence, stakeholders, kids, youth leaders, kids that are in trouble, faith community, community coalitions, we need to reach them in a much greater manner than we currently do. We have to do that. And we have to do it all at once. And that sounds hard, but it's not. We just have to have a vision of how things can be and then do it that way. You have that vision. Other people have that vision, but a lot of people are stuck doing the same things we've always done and leading to the same consequences, which is not changing the world.
My guest on this episode has been Monty Stiles. You'll be able to find links to connect with him in our show notes. Thanks again, Monty, for being here.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it so much. Keep up the great work.
And thank you for listening to Prevention Perk, a podcast from Mid-America PTTC. To learn more about our innovations, visit pttcnetwork.org and look under Your PTTC for the Mid-America link. Remember, prevention is better together, and together, we are stronger.